Welcome to Friday, and we are 1 week out from Good Friday, and we are talking about the resurrection of Jesus as written in Mark's Gospel. So yesterday we talked a lot about how the women are so key to this. They're the ones who show up, and they are the ones who are then entrusted to go tell the good news. So where do you want to go from here?
So yesterday we stopped off with kind of the statement the women heard, "Do not be alarmed, you're looking for Jesus of Nazareth, who was crucified. He has been raised, he is not here." Now, I think it is fascinating that Jesus is called Jesus of Nazareth at this point. Versus Jesus, that's a very common name, of course, would have been, but you're looking for Jesus of Nazareth. He's crucified, he's been raised, he is not here. Look, there is the place they laid him. Again, almost as if making the connection.
Yeah, the proof of the resurrection is in Mark is not the presence of a body, it's the absence of a body.
Right.
Which again is a little bit ironic, right?
So then in verse 7, "But go, tell his disciples and Peter that he is going ahead of you to Galilee."
So why does Peter get a special shout out here?
You know, I think this is one of those things. If John Mark is who we think he is, if he had been a companion of Paul, he would have also known Peter. If you're familiar with the book of Galatians, chapter 2, Paul writes that he and Peter stand opposed directly to one another.
Imagine that. The early church they fussed a little bit.
The early church fussed a little bit. Paul and Peter in Galatians 2, you should read that, stand opposed to each other's face. Paul calls Peter out for his hypocrisy. That when people from Jerusalem came to Galatia, Peter would not have dinner with those representatives along with the Gentiles.
Yeah, where before he would, till his buds showed up.
Yeah. But we all know, of course, the story of Peter, who denies Jesus 3 times after having said in the Garden of Gethsemane, "I'll never leave you, I'll never forsake you." Within 24 hours.
There was some acting there.
I'm kind of getting my theatrical.
Yeah, right.
Yeah, it's impressive, isn't it?
I'm stunned.
So go tell his disciples and Peter, as is almost like the disciples, and that guy Peter who probably should be left out. Tell his disciples and Peter that he is going ahead of you to Galilee, and there you will see him just as he told you. So, what is it about Galilee? Why is that so important?
That's where they started, for one thing.
Yeah.
Right. And in Mark's Gospel, Jesus is always working from the outside in. Doesn't start in the seat of power. Doesn't start in the temple. Starts out in the hinterlands with the change. And so, shouldn't be too surprising to us that he goes back away from the seat of power, back out into, and it's a way of also saying, again, Jesus, the temple no longer represents God, Jesus does. So Jesus doesn't need to be in the place where the temple is. Jesus can be anywhere.
So Galilee, as we know, is where Nazareth is. Galilee is the place where Capernaum is, where Jesus spends a great deal of his time before he comes to Jerusalem to die.
Public ministry took place.
So tell me about Galilee. What else does Galilee represent?
Well, it's where so much of Jesus' ministry happens. So much of his teaching is in Galilee. His miracles are in Galilee. His feeding of the 5,000 and the 4,000, depending on what, that it happens in Galilee. It's principally in Matthew's Gospel. Galilee is where the Sermon on the Mount happens. So,
and it is to be the place of the ascension.
Right.
There is a mountain in Galilee that's called the Mount of Ascension. It is a place where we believe Jesus, in whatever way, ascended into heaven.
Yeah. Physically.
Yeah. So the rest of the chapter, go tell his disciples and Peter, he's going ahead of you to Galilee. There you will see him just as he told you. Again, Jesus knew was going to die, told them that he's going to be raised from the dead, and had prepared them, even though they couldn't hear it, that he's going to go ahead to go back to Galilee. So they The women went out and fled from the tomb, for terror and amazement had seized them, and they said nothing to anyone, for they were afraid. That's how the Gospel of Mark ends. Let's talk about the irony of that, because what is the whole of the gospel message contingent upon?
Well, let's tell him.
That they went out and began to tell, even though they were afraid. And I think that's such a fitting conclusion. How afraid we are oftentimes. First to hope, to believe, but then to live as if Jesus has been raised from the dead. How hard it is for us to make that change, to live in light, not of Good Friday, but in light of resurrection.
Yeah.
Man, the world changes, and the world is different if Jesus has been raised from the dead, as we say.
It's a different light to live in. And it is. And why do you think it scares us?
I think it scares us because it's so unfamiliar. The things that we are unfamiliar with, the things that we don't know much about, those are the things that we typically are afraid of.
Well, and that if we live into the light of the resurrection, we may have to die to some of the things that we hold dear.
Yeah.
And most of the things we hold God's never going to ask us to die to something that's not beneficial to us. But most of the things we cling to, that we would say, that if we're really honest, we would say we love, most of them aren't very helpful to us. I mean, our power, and I think so many times we like to say, oh, I don't have any power. Well, we have a lot of power. Our wealth, well, I don't have any wealth. Well, actually, yeah, you do. My sense of control, my sense of being able to chart my own course in life. What does it mean to really take up your cross and follow Jesus? What does it mean to let the dead bury the dead even? What does it mean to give up everything? And that's where it gets scary. I'm afraid if I give up everything, there will be nothing left of me. But yet that's one of the things that Jesus asked us to do.
Yeah, I think the question that we have to grapple with, if we believe this story, if this story is the story by which the world has been permanently changed, then it requires something different of us, and the things that we
requires
give up.
something more than just saying, oh yeah, that sounds good, I agree with that.
Right. It requires a total and complete reorientation of our lives away from the things that we often spend, gaining our wealth, making our way in the world. Those things simply become they simply become ancillary to the real realities of life, what Jesus has done. So over these next few weeks, the church in this season after Easter grapples with, if this happened, if this is the meaning of that, what does that require of us? And Paul, in many of his letters, some of the other Gospels, John fleshes out a little bit when in that conversation with Peter, do you love me? Asked him 3 times, ironically. So I invite you to think about, what does the resurrection of Jesus Christ mean for you in your life as we...
And what does it mean that Mark left a huge gap at the end of the story? Maybe it's because we're supposed to fill in that gap with our own story and our own experience of the resurrected Jesus.
Yeah.
And not rely on someone else's story.
Yeah, we are still telling the story.
And
we're still
living
writing
it
the
out.
rest of the gospel.
And if we're following of Jesus, we're still encountering the resurrected Christ every day. So what does that look like, and how do we tell that story? And not settle for someone else's account.
So you have my permission. Anything after Mark 16, verse 8, you can summarily ignore. That's me. But I look forward to carrying on the conversation. I don't know where we're going to go next now that we finish Mark's gospel, but we'll have something.
Well, we'll figure something out.
We'll make it up as we go along. Thanks for your time.
All right, take care.